you get to work and management tells you to deliver a swing on a rural route or to carry a rural route. The day before, management tells you to come in early tomorrow. When you come in early, management has you throw parcels or distribute mail to carrier cases. This is known as crossing crafts. Management instructing you to do work outside of the city letter carrier craft. Are the above scenarios violations of the national agreement? Most likely, yes. Unless you have a limited duty job offer, and that's included in your job offer because you can't do any other letter carrier duties, that would be one of the only ways for this not to be a violation of the national agreement. Article 7.2 of the national agreement states that cross-craft assignments are only permitted to the same wage level. So now this is talking about management actually creating bid assignments with work from different crafts. This is another way that management can avoid being in violation of the national agreement. But that's not what's happening, is it? No. Instead, management on a daily basis is instructing us to work in different crafts. Let's read what it says there at 7.2a section 2. Employment and work assignments. It says normally, work in different crafts, occupational groups, or levels will not be combined into one job. However, to provide maximum full-time employment and provide necessary flexibility, management may establish full-time schedule assignments by including work within different crafts or occupational groups after the following sequential actions have been taken. 1. All available work within each separate craft by tour has been combined. 2. Work of different crafts in the same wage level by tour has been combined. The appropriate representatives of the affected unions will be informed in advance of the reasons for establishing the combination full-time assignments within different crafts in accordance with this article. So the occasional or even the regular assigning you to work in the rural craft or in the clerk craft is a violation of the national agreement. So yeah, we're going to file on it. We're going to follow the progressive principles of how to get a progressive remedy. You can learn more about this by going to NALC Steward Academy and looking up the video, How to Get Progressive Remedies. The same principles will apply. You are going to get paid an additional remedy every time management instructs you to cross crafts. Now let's look at the other scenario where management is allowed to cross crafts. It's a national arbitrator blocks decision, which is actually quoted in the national agreement, pages 714 and 715. It states, management's rights to cross craft lines is substantially limited. The exceptions to the requirement of observing the boundaries arise in situations that are not only unusual, but reasonably unforeseeable. There is no reason to find that the parties intended to give management discretion to schedule across craft lines merely to maximize efficient personnel usage. This is not what the parties have bargained for. That an assignment across craft lines might enable management to avoid overtime in another group, for example, is not by itself a contractually sound reason. It must be shown either that there was insufficient work for the classification, or alternatively, that work was exceptionally heavy in one occupational group and as well as light in another. Inherent in these two provisions, as indicated above, is the assumption that the qualifying conditions are reasonably unforeseeable or somehow unavoidable. To be sure, management retains the right to schedule tasks to suit its needs on a given day, but the right to do this may not fairly be equated with the opportunity to, in essence, create insufficient work through intentionally inadequate staffing. To so hold would be to allow management to effectively cross craft lines at will, merely by scheduling work so as to create the triggering provisions of subsections B and C. This would be an abuse of the reasonable intent of this language, which exists not to provide means by which the separation of crafts may be routinely ignored, but rather to provide the employer with certain limited flexibility in the fact of pressing circumstances. So that is the only other way. Basically an emergency situation, which I have never seen, where the letter carrier craft, for example, doesn't have any work and the clerk craft has exceptionally heavy work, or vice versa. Remember, both scenarios would have to occur simultaneously. Now, does the JCAM have a remedy for crossing crafts? Yes. It has one remedy for the losing union. At page 715 of the JCAM, it says, remedy for violations. As a general proposition, in those circumstances in which a clear contractual violation is evidenced by the fact circumstances involving the crossing of crafts, pursuant to Article 7.2b and c, a make-whole remedy involving the payment at the appropriate rate for the work missed to the available qualified employee who had a contractual right to the work would be appropriate. Of course, it would be up to that union. For example, if we're taking the rural carriers union, the rural carriers work, it would be up to the rural carriers union to file a grievance in order to get their members paid for the missed opportunity. But here is the question. Is it true, then, that there is no violation? There is no grievance for us to file when management has us work in other crafts, and that the other union must file the grievance? Absolutely not. That is a blatant lie. It is a management excuse. It is not supported by the national agreement. So we're going to file. We're going to start with cease and desist and pay the affected carriers an additional 50% for all hours worked outside of their craft. Now, you may only get a cease and desist the first time. But again, you're going to follow the same principles to obtain a progressive remedy. You're going to ask for the citable cease and desist language, and that future violations will result in management paying a monetary remedy of 50% of the straight time rate. Once you have this, you are going to up the remedy to 100%. Future violations will result in management paying 100% times the straight time rate. And you're not going to stop there. You're going to keep going and keep going until management finally decides to comply with the contract. And again, for a detailed explanation of the language that you need in order to establish these progressive remedies in your Formal A precedential settlements, can be seen in the video, How to Get Progressive Remedies. You now have a ticket to enforce your right to stop management from forcing us to work across craft lines. Yes, numbers and cost. Numbers and cost. The only thing management pays attention to. Perhaps you can force them to hire more rural carriers. Perhaps you can force them to hire more clerks. Much good will come from filing these grievances. In one of my offices, the stewards have now upped the remedy to 100% times the straight time rate. So basically penalty. Anytime somebody works across craft lines in that office, or even triple time if they're doing it on penalty already, because they're going to get another 100% on top of what they're getting paid. This presidential decision was recently upheld by the Step B team as well. Way to go, Krista and Steve. And if rural carriers or clerks were to perform duties in our craft, as we've mentioned before, we would be the ones asking for a make-whole remedy for the missed opportunity. And this is in accordance with National Arbitrator Mittenthal's decision dated August 23rd, 1982, cigar number C00089, which states in part, he did perform work which should have been performed by distribution clerks. The latter was injured by the violation, and there is no way for them to get that work back. Accordingly, the appropriate remedy is to pay 5 hours at straight time rate to one or more clerks to be designated by the parties. That is 5 hours is what was involved in that particular case. So we would get all those hours if clerks or rural carriers were delivering or casing city carrier routes. The best way to learn critical thinking is to learn to write. If you can think and speak and write, you are absolutely deadly. Nothing can get in your way. Don't let them get away with anything, brothers and sisters. Make them pay for your excellent service. Until next time, please subscribe to NALC Steward Academy on YouTube and click that notification bell so you can be notified of any new and awesome videos. Thank you for your continued support. We're in this together.